Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Seemingly Appropriate Podcast. And this is our special episode number 7, Cuties, the Conversation. I'm Val.
And I'm Larry.
And we've got Tracy. Tracy, tell everybody about you.
Hi, everybody. So I was a film major from the University of Utah. I got my bachelor's degree there. Work in film production, or used to work in film and video production. I taught film for over 10 years. And I'm also a co-host on the Movies That Make Us podcast.
Awesome. Kaitlyn, want to go next?
Sure. My name is Kaitlyn Booth. I am the editor-in-chief at Bleeding Cool. I have been a film critic since about 2013 now. And thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to have a platform to talk about this movie.
Thanks for being here. Kristen.
It's actually Kirsten. Sorry.
Kirsten,
I have a weird name. Okay. From here on out, you refer to me however you want, and I'll answer to it. It's fine.
I will say Kirsten because the I came before the R. There you go.
It's a weird name. I am actually a psychology major at the University of Utah. I am about 1.5 semesters away from getting my Bachelor of Science. Yay! I'm a non-traditional student. I am a single mother to a 13-year-old non-binary child who was assigned female at birth. I also studied film like Tracy. Unlike Tracy, I did not actually get my degree. Although, I will say, I completed all of the requirements for the film portion. It was just all that other crap that they're like, take this, take that. And I was like, oh, hi, I have to work full-time and raise a kid, so I'll be back later. And then decided psychology.
I'm right there with you. I've taken all the film classes and some of the others and had to raise a kid. So we definitely don't hold that against anybody. Everybody's got to do what they got to do. If you're new to the show, I'm Val and Larry. We are the regular co-hosts of the show. And we both work in media as well. None of us, except for Kirsten, she's probably the closest to being a professional in psychology, because we will kind of be getting into that tonight. But this is an opinion show. We are going to be having a conversation about Cuties. If you're listening and watching to us live on Facebook or YouTube, thank you. And please bring your comments in. We do want to have, a really good discussion about this topic. We know it's kind of a heightened awareness topic right now. We also want to be very respectful to everyone that has differences of opinion. So Cuties is a movie, and it kind of bothers me that everybody's like Netflix Cuties. It is streaming on Netflix. It is not a Netflix movie. Cuties is an independent film that now is streaming on Cuties, and so we're going to get into that. I want to open the door to see, when did you all see this film for the first time? And you just go down the line.
Well, I will start as the co-host. I cover the Sundance Film Festival every year. I've been there for maybe like 20 years now, pretty much. And I saw it on the schedule, and I read about it, and I didn't go see it at Sundance. I knew then it would be controversial, though, but I left that to other people to see. And then, Netflix bought it too, so that was another incentive not to watch it. I would be able to come out and try to see things that maybe you can never see. And then I just was a little nervous about watching it, to be completely honest, not because of what it was, but of how people are perceived, especially as a man. So I'm really happy that we have females here, but I saw it last night. I watched it last night to make sure I did my homework for this show.
Thank you, Larry. Tracy?
So I'm Larry. I first heard about it at Sundance. I hadn't been up there for the last couple of years, so I didn't get a chance to see it or not see it. But it was of interest to me. It won an award up there. I can't remember which one it won. Directing, thank you. Mm-hmm. And then I read about some of the controversy when the poster was released announcing that Netflix was going to be carrying the film. And I started to hear some of the controversy, and I was intrigued. And then when it landed, like the next day, my social media just blew up with all these people who had not seen the film talking about it. And so I went ahead and watched it. So I watched it this last weekend, I believe. Maybe it was Monday, but it was not too long ago.
Okay. Kaitlyn?
I actually also covered the Sundance Film Festival, and I actually did see this at Sundance back in January. I actually haven't had a chance to rewatch it since January, but I remember it very, very clearly. And I remember sitting there going, yeah, that was intense. That was a disturbing movie that made me a little uncomfortable, but okay. Like anyone who's covered Sundance in any capacity, you see some weird and sometimes disturbing and some very uncomfortable source material sometimes. It's just kind of the nature of independent film.
Yeah,
So
Kaitlyn, we're going to get into, you've been talking about this movie for a while because I follow you on social media, and I think the first time I heard about it was actually from you. Months and months and months ago, not, before all of the rainfall of what we're going to talk about tonight happened. I actually heard about it from you. So
yeah, because almost all of the movies I saw at Sundance this year had either that had female directors, and this was one of them. And a good portion, I think, over half of the movies I saw had POC female directors, which was even better. And this was on the list. And
nice.
Just kind of worked out that way this year for a couple of reasons. And yeah, so when I actually completely had forgotten that the movie had gotten picked up by Netflix until the poster dropped, and I was like, "Oh man, really? We're doing this? Okay." We can count. There are not a lot of people who have seen this movie, and one of my things are people speaking on things they have not seen and have not been able to form an opinion of, and that's one of the reasons why I went off the way I did on my social media back in August when the poster dropped, because I was like, you guys don't know what you're talking about.
Kirsten, when did you get to see it?
Last night.
Okay, so it's fresh on the brain.
It's very fresh on the brain. I love film. Before I was a single parent, I would stay on top of all the film news, especially independent films and all of this. And now that I've got, all this responsibility in my lap, it's few and far between. So really, if it hits Netflix, then I get a chance to see it after all my other daily life responsibilities have been taken care of or shunned, whichever I decide to do that day. So I saw, when I went back to watch The Witcher for like the third time, just because it's fun for me and I don't have to think too hard about it. I saw the Cuties, the little poster or screenshot, thumbnail, whatever you want to call it. And to me, Netflix maybe screwed up a little bit, because to me it just looked like, I was like, oh God, here we go. Another parents pushing their kids too hard in dance movie. I have zero desire to see this. Yeah. And I forgot about it.
Yeah. So we'll definitely get into that for sure.
Yeah. It wasn't until, Tracy actually had commented something on Facebook, and we're friends there. And like Kaitlyn, I was like, why are these people commenting if they haven't seen it? Let me do some research. And I was like, oh no, this is right up my alley. We're going to watch this. We're going to analyze it from a parent's point of view and a psychologist's point of view, or almost psychologist's point of view, and just go to town.
You're there. You just need, now at this point, like, it's just formalities, but you're totally there. So
I tell my kid all the time that I'm a scientist, so that we'll just go with it.
I tell my kid a lot of things that aren't true as well. I'm just kidding. All right. So if you have not heard of Cuties, or you haven't seen it, but you tuned in to see what we have to say about it. It's about a girl named Amy. She's 11 years old. She joins a group of dancers named the Cuties at school. And things go off from there. Now, this girl lives in a very conservative family. Her mother has religious values that she's trying to teach her. And there's a lot of things going on with her mom. It's like a side story with her mom that she's got to deal with at the same time. And this girl, she's right there in the life. If you've ever been an 11, 12, 13-year-old girl, you are trying to figure we're going to educate you tonight on what this is like. You're trying to figure out where you fit in and where you want to fit in and what you want to do. And you are, at least me, I related to this movie a lot. So I'm going to get into what I related, and I'm going to ask you guys some questions. So I grew up a very Catholic family. Okay. My mom's the oldest of 8 Italian Catholics. And we moved to Utah, and me moving to Utah, I figured out what religion was. I didn't know what religion was before I moved here. I just thought everybody went to the same place on Sundays and they listened to somebody talk about things that you're supposed to do in your life. And then you go eat cookies afterwards and have donuts and then you go home. Like, I just thought that's what it was. And I got here and quickly realized that's not what it is. I got told that people couldn't play with me because I didn't go to the right church and that I was going to hell. This was in 1st grade. Okay. So I'm trying to be my parents' religion and have those priorities. I'm trying to fit in a that have, are we okay? I don't know if I got glitchy there. Are we back?
You're still okay for a second. We did have
are we back? Something happened.
You are back.
You're good.
You are back.
A little glitchy. Okay. I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Not so much now.
Am I frozen or are you guys frozen? I don't know what's going on.
Oh, maybe
Everything
she can't
looks
see
fine
us.
on-
We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. And we can see you okay too.
I think just keep talking is the thing to do, and hopefully the audio will or the video.
I don't know.
will
Can
fix
you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Everyone's glitched out to me. Maybe it's, I don't know. I'll wait till you all come back in.
We can hear and see you.
She's actually gone. So I cannot fill in her childhood, unfortunately. I can't talk about a number of things. But being a preteen girl and being Valerie, those
All
things.
right. Okay. Sorry, since the power went out in our neighborhood and they keep fixing things, my internet's been glitchy like all week, which is great when you have to work from home. So I'm trying to grow up in a world where I have my religion plus the dominant religion, plus I'm a white girl in Utah in elementary and junior high that likes hip hop music. And I've been dancing since I was 3 years old. Okay, so to me, dance clothes aren't inappropriate because they're a function of what I have to wear when I go to ballet class. I have to wear these specific clothes. When I go to hip hop class, I have to wear these specific clothes. And yes, when you grow up a teenage girl, you do kind of I watched music videos. I wanted to be that Janet Jackson video with the midriff and do like all the moves, right? And all the lyrics. Yeah. And my mom dropped me off at a 2 Live Crew concert at the University of Utah. She had no idea. I was in junior high. She took me and all my friends. My mom let me discover whatever music I wanted to discover, right? She had no idea. I had no idea. We all just listened to music. I didn't know what they were saying. And then they're throwing out condoms and we're like 12 and 13 years old, right? But what I'm trying to say is I went and I had really no idea what this sexual content was. I knew I felt good.
Right.
I knew that I wanted to wear the clothes of the heroes that I saw in music videos. I didn't have social media. We didn't talk as crudely as these girls did on the show because we didn't have social media, right? And so when I watched this show, I'm watching these girls and I'm thinking, this is me and my friends. Like, this is us trying to find the clothes that fit in because, you know, our parents may not buy us the clothes. This is me watching MTV for 5 hours to get past all the crap music so I can watch that one Janet Jackson music video one more time, or Missy Elliott or something, you know? And we didn't have anybody videoing us and like putting it all over the world, but this was us, and going through dance moves in parking lots and trying to figure out how to do the butterfly and, you know, the hip moves. We do not know at this point if we do this hip move, then a grown ass man is going to think these thoughts about us.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, we didn't have social media. It makes it very different. If I would have had social media back then, I hope my mom would have had a conversation with me to talk to me about what, as an 11, 12, and 13-year-old girl, I should be putting on social media. So kind of going through that's kind of what I got from it. As you guys are watching it, especially the men, but I'm going to start with the women first, ladies, as you're watching this movie, is it so far from how you grew up? Because I know we all grew up differently, or did you relate to it? So how did you, and we'll start with Kirsten, how did you kind of feel about it when you were watching it?
I grew up in a very conservative religious household, and I grew up in Utah. As an adult, I moved to New England, which is where I used to say most of my adult life, but now I'm really old, so I can't say that anymore, but it still feels like most of my adult life. And it's a different world. It really, really is once you get outside of Utah. It's just the way it is. And I'm not saying one place is better than the other, although one place does have prettier trees and better coffee. So judge however you want. When I came back to Utah, I did experience a little bit of a culture shock, and I was no longer part of that conservative religion. So growing up, like you, I was a dancer from the age of about 4 on up, primarily ballet, but also some modern and hip hop and tap and really anything that I could get my hands on. I was also a gymnast for several years. So again, like you, I don't look at these dance outfits and immediately associate them with something provocative. To me, it's just you wear what you wear to dance, and it gets hot and you're sweaty and it's gross, and you don't want to wear a lot of clothes when you're doing activities like that. So there was no inherent sexual meaning in that for me as a kid. There still isn't now. My child participated in dance at middle school, and they have to wear something that covers their shoulders, which is
called
just
porn shoulder. It's called porn shoulder.
yes. Which
my daughter did a paper on it at junior high and high school. I love her so much. Porn shoulder.
That's yeah.
Good, Tammy.
Okay. I didn't know that had a technical term.
I can get into how I feel dress codes are sexist maybe later,
No,
but yeah, my mind
We'll
was
just have
just
another
blown.
show.
Yeah. I just thought, how are you making them wear more things? You can't even see what their bodies are doing, and you need to know because you're the dance teacher. So, but I did, yeah, I didn't know. For me, it was Madonna. That was who I was trying to emulate. Can you imagine? As a child, I had no idea. I didn't know what sex was.
Right.
They're just body movements. There's no, when you're that age and that naive, you're not
Right?
associating those
Wow.
things. And just developmentally, you're at that stage where, like you were saying, Val, kids at that age, it's one of those what I call the tween times, even though it's not specifically for tweens, where you're transitioning. You go through it as a toddler, where you're starting to find your individuality. You do it again as 11, 12, 13, which is a nightmare because now you've got puberty involved and it's just off the rails completely. But it was very amazing to me in that first half of the film. I was like, why are people mad? This is what life is when you're a kid.
Like, did somebody take my life and like put it?
Exactly. It resonated so strongly. You're just trying to fit in somewhere and feel your worth and your value. And you're going to get that wherever you can. No social media for me growing up either, but that
Thank goodness,
definitely, it's a big conversation parents need to have with their kids, because at this age, developmentally, brains aren't fully formed really until you're in your early to mid 20s. So there's no sense of consequences. If I post this, it could have this long-term consequence. Kids aren't thinking that. So as parents, as caregivers, as teachers, as whatever, we need to be having these very frank conversations about that, and not assume that just because we're talking about, bodies, that we're talking about sex or banging everybody or whatever it is. We're the ones that assign the meanings, but movements in and of themselves are just movements. They don't mean anything unless you understand what's going on behind them. So that was kind of my experience watching that. But yeah, it was like, this was me. This was my like a virgin and whatever. Like, and I didn't even know what that meant. Does it mean you're from Virginia?
Yeah.
Who knows? I must have been. So
I want to get chocolate wasted. How about you, Kaitlyn? I mean, you saw it in a theater, like with people around you. Most of us are watching it at our homes by ourselves. So what was that experience like?
It was just like sitting in any other Sundance press screening, because I saw it in a PNI screening, and it was just like, it was just another screening. Like, there was a reason it's a good movie. Don't get me wrong, and I did enjoy it, and it resonated with me as well. I was not a dancer. I did a couple of years of dance, but it never really. I don't have moves. This girl doesn't have moves, so I never danced. I danced for a couple of years, and that was it. But I remember it was, I believe it was Tracy's thread online I remembered that there are these pictures of me at summer camp. I think I was younger than 11, actually. I was probably 9. And I had like tied the bottom of my shirt so you could see my midriff. And I was like posing like this and like thrusting my chest out and everything. And I don't remember why I was doing it, but I was definitely doing it. And it's like, that's not an appropriate pose for a kid that age. But it's like, I was just doing it because I didn't understand the context. And that was something that I don't think the people who had the immediate knee-jerk reaction to this movie understand, is that, and I hate pulling out the "you don't understand the movie" card, because I don't. It makes me sound so pretentious, and I dislike it. But I feel like this movie was not subtle. It was like as subtle as a 2x4 to the face. Like, yes, that final dance number is incredibly uncomfortable to watch. It's supposed to be.
Absolutely.
That's the point. If you look out into the audience is horrified. You are supposed to be horrified. And I remember sitting there watching the scene and being horrified. Are we getting into various levels of spoilers here? We're
gonna spoil the shit out of it. If they haven't watched it and they're listening to this, it's their own fault. So
you've seen before the dance, she like straight up pushes one of the other girl who's moving in on her territory into the water, and it's like subtly implied that the girl can't swim, and she might have just freaking killed her. I'm like, that seems way more disturbing than the dancing stuff, guys. Like, why are we focusing on that?
There was also a kid fight at some point, like a slap fight, where a girl was pretty aggressive to her friend, pretty aggressive. And that was one of my thoughts last night. It was like, I sure didn't hear anyone object to that. And I also don't think anyone's like, if my daughter watches this movie, she's going to fight. I don't think anyone said that
my
either.
daughter watches this movie, she's going to push another kid into a freaking
canal. Because we're okay with violence.
I honestly felt that the bullying in this movie was way more, it made me feel more uncomfortable than, anything else. It was second to like the video on the stairs, like that whole montage of the dancing on the stairs. That was probably my number one uncomfortable moment, and we'll get into that later. But the bullying, I'm glad you brought that up, Larry, because I'm watching that and I knew that girl who slapped the shit out of everyone in junior high, and that's the person that I tried to save my friends from. Like, I was small, like I'm short, but I have a mouth on me. I'm Italian and Scottish, so I will get in the way. But like that girl, the bullying that these 4 girls, like the attitudes that they have, is to me more worrisome than the dance moves that they're trying to pull off. Yeah. So, Larry, is that kind of what you got from it when you watched it last night?
Well, I mean, I got a million things from it, but that definitely crossed my mind. I just thought, like, whoa, that one character in particular is super aggressive. I mean, let's be honest about this. Many, many, many of the people who are objecting to this film have not seen it. And by the way, any of you are free to object to the film. I'm not saying that's not the case, but but the other reality is they've watched a Twitter video from the end scene, so really people can't object to the bullying because they have no idea it's in the show, and people can't object to because they have no idea, which philosophically kind of have a problem with. Like, I just feel like adults, I'm not saying, hey, show this to your kids, because you shouldn't probably, but I do feel like adults ought to be able to see that Twitter video and then say, before I make a decision about what I think about this film, maybe I better watch it and be informed. And look, if I thought that Twitter video wasn't the worst part, or if there was some indication that actually, in fairness, there are indications that there are worse parts, even though there aren't. I guess adults could make assumptions, but an adult who is, well, anyway, I think I've said enough.
Well, Tracy, what did you, sorry, we'll get back to you, Kaitlyn. Tracy, what did you think really quick, and then we'll kind of move into the juicy parts of this film?
Yeah, so being a survivor of abuse, I had a different take slightly, but I can separate reality from fantasy, and I get so frustrated, and I'm with Larry, of these people taking these scenes out of context, because the context, as Kaitlyn mentioned at the end, when the audience is horrified, that context and those cutaways are everything.
Yeah.
And a lot of people aren't even watching that clip. They're reading the description of the clip. And when I posted my thoughts saying a lot of this is much ado about nothing, I got direct messages saying that I was a pedophile, that I was promoting child abuse, that I must have like a collection of child pornography. Upsetting at people's reactions. And these aren't close friends. These were acquaintances on Facebook. But I just went ahead and got rid of them because I'm like, you don't know who I am. You don't know what I stand for. And you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that brings up, and we're going to talk about Kaitlyn's experience in a minute. But for me, the reason why I wanted to talk about this film is really less to do about the film, but we are going to get into it, and more to do about our society right now. Okay. I thought the film was boring, honestly. There are parts in the film that I think the story is important to talk about. You should utilize this. The reason why I went to film school and wanted to make movies is so that I could make something that would cause someone to be educated about something else, that would cause conversations, right? Mm-hmm. I learned more from watching Schindler's List than I did in any class in school. Right. So I'm like, I want to make movies because of that. This is a film that you watch as an adult and you think to yourself, what's the bigger picture? I should probably go talk to my kids and have real conversations about sexuality, about body imaging, about social media, and about how people are seeing you. Because Tracy admitted that he's been abused. As a woman, especially a woman in dance, a woman in entertainment, a woman that has worked in every single male job my entire life, I have been in all different kinds of situations. Does that mean that I have to change the way I dress or how I talk or what? Sometimes that did. Like, we've all grown up with it. But this movie, and the reason why the director made this movie, and I posted on our Facebook page her interview, she made this movie because she went to a festival and watched a bunch of underage kids do suggestive dance. And she's like, what is happening? They're up there doing that because nobody's having conversations with them to say, this is maybe why you shouldn't be doing this at 11, 12, and 13 years old. Does that mean you should be ashamed of your body, ashamed of what you like, and ashamed of the music you listen to? No, it shouldn't. But this movie is a springboard to conversation. But what's happening right now is people, because of the world we're living in right now and how everyone is so emotional about everything. One person says the word pedophile and it just gets, everyone glams onto that. And now they don't even know what they're arguing about. And now you're a pedophile and you're a pedophile and you're a pedophile. That is very irresponsible. That is like so irresponsible. Kaitlyn, tell us a little bit about what happened to you on Twitter. Can you share that with us?
Sure, I would love to. So I did a whole really long tweet thread when the first poster came out and the controversy really started. And I'm Twitter friends with a Forbes writer named Scott Mendelson. He's a great, sweet, sweet guy. He retweeted my thread. Scott has like 25,000 plus followers. And my mentions were just inundated for days and days and days, talking about just like accusing me of all of these terrible things. And then when the movie finally came out, another friend of mine, Monica, who writes for Roger Ebert, posted her review, and she had to leave Twitter for a couple of days because she was getting so many death threats. And I just posted, I was like, hey, I'm sorry this is happening to you. I support you. And also, I actually enjoyed the movie. I thought it was pretty good. And somebody literally responded to that thread, me and a couple other critics, and said, we've got another one at FBI.
I saw that.
Next day, I was added to a Twitter list of people who defended Cuties, aka possible pedophiles. And
unreal.
I didn't even get it that bad, to be honest. I cannot believe I have to say this. So about 5 days into Sundance, I had a complete nervous breakdown and got very, very suicidal, and I was not able to actually write my review on Cuties. I had to say the words, I'm glad I had a nervous breakdown because I didn't write my review, because otherwise I would have put my entire website at jeopardy. All of my writers would have gotten horrible, horrible things. And we've been inundated with stuff before. We write about controversial stuff. but I had to sit there and have a conversation with my managing editor because I wanted to defend the movie right off the bat. And I was like, I want to defend this movie. I still want to defend this movie, but I don't know if I can justify the possible harm that would be coming to the rest of my staff, because they would go after everybody. My owner and my managing editors would probably start getting phone calls calling for my termination because I'm a possible pedophile for defending this movie, apparently, is the narrative that these people are pushing. So it's just the stuff that I have seen, the people I know who actually went out and did their stupid jobs and reviewed this movie has just been absolutely horrific. And it's like, I get it. And I had a conversation about this with another local critic. You know, I understand that stuff makes people uncomfortable. And honestly, if Cuties makes you uncomfortable and you don't want to watch it, then don't watch it. That's fine. Yeah. I go through the Sundance list every year and I go, that sounds like it'll have a rape scene. That sounds like it'll have a rape scene. That sounds like it'll have a rape scene. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. I haven't seen Jennifer Kent's movie, who did the Babadook, the Nightingale, because Ryan Painter from KUTV said, don't see it. It's got a graphic rape scene and you will not be able to handle it. And I said, good, not going to see it. So I've cut myself out of the conversation. It's like, if you don't, I know what triggers me. You need to be able to come to terms with what you can't handle and then just not see it. But then you also need to realize that that means you have to remove yourself from the conversation. You cannot form an in-depth opinion about a piece of art if you haven't seen the art. And that
right.
It's like, yeah.
Can we talk about the poster for a minute? I want to talk about the poster controversy.
Can I jump in super quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Larry. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think there is a division. There's a little bit of a gap, Kaitlyn, with something you just said between many of the people who are commenting. And I tend to side with you, but I just want to mention this other side as well. You just said art. You just called the film art. There are many, many people, almost all of them who haven't seen it, who don't think maybe any film, maybe only a few films, definitely not this film, is art.
Right.
They think it's, they would just say that it's for entertainment. Movies are for entertainment, first of all. And they would also say that this particular movie is to cater to, perverts. Mm-hmm. So while I relate very much to you saying, like, don't comment about art unless you've seen the art, there's a vast field of people who don't, that doesn't even compute with them, that this film might be art. That doesn't even, makes no sense to them whatsoever. So, and look, that's a lot of people, right? Like, that's a lot of people on the street who they just don't feel that same way. Now I do, right? I totally agree with you. But as we have this conversation, it's important to remember there's people who are like, movies are mostly trash. Hollywood is garbage. It's a moral pit of violence, and this movie especially. So that's part of the reality. That's part of the people who are feeling these things about movies.
Yeah. And Larry,
now,
you and I had a conversation after our other show yesterday about this being, because a lot of people are saying that this is kind of like a movie that is made for pedophiles, that these kids are up there and people are going to watch this. This is what I have to say about this. You have to get really far into this film to see. And I don't really know like the psyche of a pedophile. I've done a lot of research because this is something I want to know about. I've watched iPedophile. I feel like it's my job to know things that I don't know so that I can know about them and deal with them and help whatever situations I can in my life. But I would think, to me, with everything that you can get in one click these days on the internet, why would a pedophile turn on subtitles of a French movie to read through a boring script? I'm sorry, it's a good idea, but it was kind of boring. And I watched it 3 times to get to a point where you see girls doing semi-inappropriate dance moves and kissy faces to the camera when you can go and push porn.com and like get what you need to get. I'm assuming. I'm not a pedophile. I don't know. I don't have those tendencies. But to me, for someone, unless they're really, really into subtitled movies with girls in dance clothes, for like maybe 3 minutes of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so that's just my
Yeah.
little thing about that. Kirsten, maybe you have something to say about that while I bring up the poster.
I do have something to say about that.
Good.
That concept that someone who is dealing with being a pedophile, which is abnormal and is a disease, disorder, however you want to categorize it, because it's abnormal, you cannot fit it into a box of normal behavior. So it is absolutely erroneous to say that dressing this way would excite a pedophile, or this movie would excite a pedophile, because you're thinking with normal psychology brain, and that's not how pedophilia works. So if you really don't ever want to arouse a pedophile, then all children must disappear. So it's almost getting into that category of victim blaming. And you cannot, when we make these statements as a society, as parents, as caregivers, teachers, role models, whatever, that somehow your actions or the way you dress or the things that you say invite a crime upon you is incredibly damaging. And frankly, I would say to anyone who has made that statement, please take a step back. Because if you're saying out loud these types of things and say your child has been sexually abused, they are now blaming themselves. And you cannot do that. It is already hard enough. So again, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. The people who are committing crimes and who have abnormal psychology disorders that they're dealing with are not going to behave in the same way. And we cannot hold those victims and most vulnerable of our society responsible for the crimes and acts of somebody else. That's just it's not healthy and it's not right.
Yeah.
You cannot accurately predict the actions of a madman. That's what makes him a madman.
Exactly.
What were you going to say, Larry?
Question, Kirsten. Yeah, I don't know if Kirsten can answer this, so no pressure if you cannot, but I know I cannot. Is there any idea, because I don't think we as a society would ever try to learn about pedophiles, we just cannot punish them. Is there any notion of what percentage of the world has this kind of disorder? Does anyone know that?
I'm not, my general focus of psychology is actually with adolescents. So what I know about this particular aspect of things is really just in relation to helping adolescents. Far as when you get into things like this, it's going to be hard to categorize anyway, just like it used to be really hard. And I'm not equating these two, but what I am going to say is, 50 years ago, it was illegal to be homosexual. So it was hard to get a clear idea of who, and I'm a queer woman, so I'm not saying that pedophilia is part of that. It absolutely is not. Being, part of the LGBTQIA community is not a disorder in any way, shape, or form. So, but you can't get a good read on some of these things if people don't feel safe in coming out, which is maybe another unfortunate side effect. People who are experiencing the disorder of pedophilia need help. But again, as we've seen with the vitriol going on, even just online, you're a pedophile, pitchforks and whatever. That's not the way to deal with someone who, at the end of the day, is a human being and needs help. So as far as getting an accurate number of that, I don't think we ever will.
Yeah, I know
that's just
that
my opinion.
When I watched the movie I, Pedophile, the documentary I, Pedophile, the research that they're doing right now is they're trying to get some of those numbers, and they have actually had people come forward so they could do this research, and they said, okay, so we have, let's just say 2,000 people that came forward, but there's probably 200,000 people who have had pedophile thoughts that need help in just that area of Germany where they did this study. They also did it in Canada, and they think that there was 400,000 pedophiles in just that area. Now, saying that you're a pedophile doesn't mean that you have done anything. It means that you have thoughts and that you don't feel comfortable, but they can't come forward. So we can't get those numbers because So again, these are things I would like to know so that I can be knowledgeable. But again, we live in a society that knowledge right now, it is hurting people because people are getting the wrong information. So going to the poster, but I would tell you to check out iPedophile. I wouldn't say on Facebook or on Instagram that you've watched it because it won't be good for you. But I found it informative because then I went beyond the documentary and I started learning more. So I use those things as a bounce board. That's what I said earlier. So this is the first poster for the movie. Now, seeing this poster for Cuties makes me feel like we're just going to watch a best friend movie. These girls went shopping. Like this is nothing, right? And then Netflix got a hold of it, and they changed the poster to a different poster that we're going to look at. So the difference is. And I don't know.
The funny thing is, the poster, the original French poster, is also from an extremely kind of weird scene, which is where they have essentially shoplifted a bunch of panties.
Yeah,
because they don't they've shoplifted a bunch of lingerie because they don't know what the hell they're doing. They're kids, like.
Yeah.
Well, they're spending money that the girl stole from her mom.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that to me is a little bit crazy. Keep talking. My mom would have killed me. My mom would have.
As far as the poster goes, I feel like Netflix. This is the scene that is taken at the end of the movie. This is the dance competition, and you remove all context from this scene. But this scene to me does not say. This doesn't sexually arouse me. This doesn't make me think that somebody would be aroused by this. Do I think Netflix screwed up? Yeah, they really did. But then the question is, if you just bought an independent French film directed by a Senegalese woman, how do you market this about these girls who are trying to go through puberty, who are trying to find their way? So the marketing department, and I work in marketing, had a really tough time from the beginning with this film. The complaint that I'm getting more now is okay, I've listened to you. I understand that this is not what the film is about. The film is about letting kids be kids. But the director abused these children by having these girls actually dance. Mm-hmm. And that is so frustrating to me because, one, there were counselors on set. The girls' parents were all on set. Two, you're placing your opinions of morality onto another culture, on several other cultures, being French and from Senegal. And three, if we're this upset about children and child actors, what about the kids in horror films who have to pretend that they're possessed by the devil and murder somebody? Why are we not upset about that? Why are we not upset about all these other things?
Yeah.
To me, that's much more damaging than doing some dance moves and being provocative for a few minutes.
You know what, the scene that I thought of, somebody keeps bringing up, what's the movie? It's like the Good Boys or something like that. But
yes.
Speaking of horror, I was thinking of Dr. Sleep and the scene that Jacob Tremblay had to shoot for that, and how horrifying that scene is.
Yes.
But
that's okay because it's boys.
Yeah. It's boys,
and it's not sex.
Yeah, but killing, and I say this a lot, is like we're okay with going on primetime television and showing people how to build a bomb and how to work a gun and how to buy a gun than we are with the human form and the body. Like we think the body is way more horrible than building things that kill people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and poster, the second poster, have you guys seen the movie Bring It On? It looks like the movie poster from Bring It On to me.
Exactly.
I thought it was an American movie. I didn't even know it was French from that second poster.
Yeah.
I legitimately thought it was an American crappy TV show about crazy parents pushing their kids. I really did.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I was like, wait, that's French? That looks very American.
Larry, what were you going to say?
It is very much American.
Yeah.
I just think the original Netflix poster was very much intended to conjure Bring It On. That was purposeful.
Oh, yeah.
That's not accidental, and you weren't reminded of that by accident.
Yeah.
Well, were people this upset when Britney Spears did Oops, I Did It Again when she was 16? Were we this upset with the Blue Lagoon? I mean,
Or Little
it just
Miss
Blue Lagoon,
Sunshine.
people were upset
Little
about
Miss
the Blue Lagoon,
Sunshine?
actually. Little Miss
Well, I did
Sunshine,
want-
Keep bringing up in terms
Yeah.
of like remembering things that happened forever ago. Were people this angry when 13 came out?
They were.
Yeah.
I don't know about this angry, but they were angry.
Yeah.
I don't remember a backlash for Little Miss Sunshine, but it isn't crazy to say that there's some comparisons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I think maybe this is just me off the top of my head, but Little Miss Sunshine was more for comedy, where this was more. It was much more serious, and so I think somehow that makes it okay. I don't know for sure. It's hard. Well, yeah. There's this one, Val. I don't know what you plan to do next. We're starting to run out of time. There's this. I really wanted to ask
honestly,
a question.
we can talk as long as we all want to talk. So, I mean, if we're having a good conversation and everybody's good with going 15 minutes over, I'm good with it. So,
I don't have anything
Okay.
to do.
Well, my goal is to not talk too much today. I want as a man, I feel like we joked about this, but I've not been an 11-year-old girl. I've never been through that
Right.
experience. I haven't even had daughters. I do have sons, and they don't dance. They play guitar, and they don't dress provocatively while they do it. So it's really hard for me to quite relate. But I really wanted to know, any of you who have daughters who have been young dancers, is what we saw in the film reflective of what actually happens in dance companies or dance competitions? Not all of them. I'm not asking does this happen in every one, but is what we saw somewhat realistic to the real world? Does anybody know?
I want to say first, like, this was them putting together their own routine outside of a studio.
Right.
I've been a dancer since 3. I've been teaching dance since I was 13 years old, and I owned my own dance studio for 10 years. Okay. I stopped teaching dance because parents are dicks. I couldn't, I only teach adults now. I don't teach kids anymore because parents have their own agendas for what they want their kids to do. I also taught dance at a private school that was elementary all the way up to high school. I taught their cheerleaders and their dance company and their regular curriculum dance class. I made sure that these kids were covered from head to toe because it was a very modest school. But we did use songs like Pink, Pink's music and Britney Spears music and Missy Elliott music. And of course I would edit it so that there wasn't anything too inappropriate. The parents were angry because I wasn't having them do drill. I was having them do jazz and hip hop, which is what they hired me to do. I think drill is stupid. That's just my opinion. But because of the music that was behind what they were dancing to, I could have taken that exact dance and put it to not popular hip hop music, and they would have been totally fine with it. So I think there's also a culture there that once you add a tone to it, because it's now hip hop or a different culture that you don't feel comfortable, it's now not okay, regardless of what they're wearing or what their dance moves are. So I want to say that. My daughter was also in pageants from the time she was in first grade until she was 13 years old. And we would watch Toddlers and Tiaras and Dance Moms. Dance Moms would give me anxiety because I would get flashbacks from these moms that I would teach their kids. Okay. And I'm not saying it's 100% this world. There is a percentage of the dance world and a percentage of the pageant world where these moms are using their kids for their own agenda. They will put any amount of makeup on them, any amount of hair extensions, and any amount of skimpy outfit on them if it makes it so that they win. There is also a huge part of it that is all about the technical side, and they want them to be a good artist. So I don't know that we can clamor it all, but it is definitely something that we should talk about because, like, dance, if you watch any episode of Dance Moms or Toddlers and Tiaras, you see these kids being used. Yes, are they having a good time? Yeah, but then they grow up and realize maybe they weren't having such a great time. It's like 1% that grows up and keeps doing what that was. The rest of them leave.
So, Val, I mean, every word of that is super important, but I still don't know the answer. Does it? I think you answered maybe, but does kind of not? Look, it's really important to note that the kids made their own dance routine from what they found on social media. That's a huge point of the movie.
Right.
They went out, they looked at videos, and they emulated these videos, not knowing how inappropriate they were. I mean, that's really one of the points of the film. But I've asked a couple of moms on Facebook and just said, hey, does this at all touch on reality? And some parents told me, yes, my daughter didn't do that, but yes, I've seen things like this on stage. So I guess this is really all I wanted to say. If that's true, let's just say that's true. People out there could argue, or maybe you guys can argue. But if that's true, then the film is a mirror, right? And people are mad about the mirror, but maybe they need to be mad about what the mirror is reflecting and not the mirror itself. So if this movie is reflecting reality, then we don't like it, we better go figure out more about the reality, because the film is, if this is happening, if it's somewhat realistic, the film is only a mirror, and you know, the problem is not the film. The problem is that the film is showing something that makes people really uncomfortable. That probably is realistic.
And that brings me to my next point. There's a documentary called Audrey and Daisy that's on Netflix.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And this documentary about Audrey and Daisy, I watched it with my boyfriend because my boyfriend actually knew about this tattoo artist. These two girls moved to a small town. They were underage. They went to a house full of underage boys from high school, but they were older than them. They were in junior high. The boys were in high school. The guys got them drunk and high and raped them. These kids in this town were heroes. They played on the football team. Everybody knew each other, and these girls were outsiders. So it was their fault that they got raped. This town did not want to look at themselves and the problem, like Larry is saying. They get mad at the mirror because they don't want to admit that there's anything wrong with what's in front of them. And this movie made me think so much about Cuties, because these girls put this stuff on social media and they're underage, and now they're being called all of these names, like Kirsten brought up earlier, right? And now these girls from this other documentary, one of them just recently committed suicide because she could not get past it last year. I recommend watching this documentary because it very much shows you what's going on right now with this movie. Is we don't want to see what's wrong with us. We don't want to talk about what's wrong with us. We don't want to talk about with maybe what's going on in our lives and what we can help our kids with, because that would say that we weren't being good parents to talk to our kids in the first place. And I'm not saying that. I am not a perfect parent. I learn things all the time. But when I see something that maybe I should talk to my kid about, I try and talk to her about it, right? We sat down. I found out my kid read 13 Reasons Why, the book, 2 years after she read it. I had no idea that my sister had given her that book in junior high and she read it. Then when the Netflix show came on, I said, do you know about this? And she said, I read the book. And I was like, oh, okay, let's sit down and watch 13 Reasons Why together. And we watched it, every uncomfortable scene together. And then we talked about 13 Reasons Why. And then we watched the next season together and we talked about it, because you know what she said? She said, every single kid in my school is watching it on their cell phone at school. Mm-hmm. Your kid, just like in this movie, Cuties, your kid is going to see those music videos. Your kid is going to get a hold of those clothes that you don't want them to wear. Your kid is going to say all the words you don't think that they say when you're not around. So if you don't have these hard discussions with your kids and you're not open with them, they're going to get the information somewhere else because they already have. They already have. And if you don't talk to them about them, they're going to be the boys that grew up in this town that raped these girls and nobody thought they did anything wrong because they're from the town and these girls are outsiders and they wore provocative clothes and they shouldn't have gone to the boy's house and maybe they should have known better to drink. No. We're telling the victims it's their fault, just like Kirsten said.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when you're talking about that, what Cuties made me think again, and I've thought this before, we are failing our children, and we are in particular failing our non-cisgender children. This film, of course, is specifically about girls, and it is an impossible route that they have to navigate, that we had to navigate as kids, and we didn't even have social media. But you have this kind of forcible modesty on the very, strict conservative religious end of the spectrum. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got that kind of hypersexualization in the media, and all of these things come into play and just smack you in the face from before you even hit puberty. They've done research where girls stop feeling good about themselves and their bodies at age 8. God. And it is heartbreaking. We are giving them no tools. We're giving them no role models. There's nothing. And this is a huge problem in the media anyway, the way women are objectified, the way girls are objectified. And unless we have those conversations like you were talking about, Val, we've given them nothing. And it's just like, hey, go out there where you're going to be ridiculed for having childish underwear when you get pantsed, which happened to me when I was in 6th grade. And I also got ridiculed. But then if you go to the other side and try to be grown up, because what kid doesn't want to be kind of grown up? Mm-hmm. I was stick thin as a little kid, and obviously not anymore, but I wanted so much to be kind of that curvy Marilyn Monroe, and I thought about it all the time, and I padded my bra, and if I could have just go back in time and say, hold on, you're going to be totally fine, and give it about 20 years, you're going to be golden. And you'll be a burlesque dancer. You just wait, it'll be fine. Might have been a little bit easier for me. But I remember going through that because you learn so young that your only value, even in the church that I was raised in, your only value is in how you look and what you give to other people. You don't have any inherent value just on your own as a human being. Mm-hmm. And so when we have kind of this society that has sort of run with this idea for decades and decades and decades, or hundreds of years, or however long you want to look at it, that is problematic. But now we've added that social media layer on top. You cannot screw up. You need to be exactly perfect and a prude, but not too much of a prude, because then you're no fun and no one wants to be friends with you. It's a lose-lose situation. And I had to talk to my kiddo about sex in, I think it was 3rd grade, and I'm a very kind of sex positive person, and don't be ashamed of your body, call the parts what they really are, and all these things. We talked about consent, but I was not prepared to have the discussion when they were in 3rd grade. That was, whoa, what's going on? And the reason it came up is because the question that I got asked was, Mom, what's rape? Oh, and I was like, where's the handbook? So these things are happening, and whether or not you let your kid have a cell phone, they're going to get a hold of it. Yep. So let's not maybe try this whole abstinence only idea with social media or phones or the media, because it's just going to happen. But if you give them the tools, let's talk about this. Please don't ever take a picture of a body part and send it to anybody or post it, and here's why. Then they're a little more better equipped. They're still not going to gauge consequences well, but at least if you have that open dialogue, my kid comes and tells me stuff they find online all the time. And sometimes it's hilarious. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to know this, but I'm glad that we have that open connection. And I actually plan to sit down and watch Cuties with my kid and just say, hey, let's talk about this. Let's talk about, what bothers you or what you think about it. Because you're 13. I want to know what the world looks like from your point of view so that I can give you the perspective perspective that I'm through living and screwing things up 1,000 times over. But that was my reaction. We're failing our children. And that's it.
Real quick, if I can hop in just real quick, Val. I don't have any kids of my own, but I have nieces, and I can't imagine for you on this panel who have teenage daughters or younger, how difficult it must be to try and raise these kids in this age. And Kirsten, you're exactly right. The girl has no exposure to a cell phone or social media until she steals it from a guy. She steals one of her neighbor's phones. And you're absolutely right. Kids are going to find this stuff. The kids are watching stuff on TikTok. They're watching stuff on YouTube. They're watching stuff that they can find in Google. They're getting into social media. There's all this stuff. And if you think that it's not happening to your kid, you're absolutely wrong. And that's so frustrating for the people that haven't seen the movie and don't want to talk about it. And they just want to have blinders on.
Mm-hmm.
So props to you parents out there, man. Props to you.
Yeah.
That's what whiskey's for occasionally. That's the handbook. Oh, great conversation. Go to bed.
I do want to talk a little bit more about the movie. We've got, a few more minutes if you guys are good. One of my my favorite moments of the movie was actually at the end of the film. Again, I keep saying the beginning part of the movie, which is kind of boring to me because I felt like, okay, this isn't anything
it's
new.
It's slow paced at the start.
It's just slow paced. And I was waiting for all of this salacious stuff. Like I was just thinking, the whole time I was going to be like, I don't want to watch this, but I was just like, when's it coming? And, the scene on the stairs where they're videoing the girls kind of pretending like they're in a music video and they're doing kissy faces, that maybe could have been cut out of the film and the film would have been just as the point would have come across. That's the only thing I would have cut out of the film, but I didn't think it was worse than a lot of other things I've ever seen with these same age groups and other shows, right? But the part that I liked, and maybe it's because I'm like newly divorced, and so this is kind of on my mind, is when the main character is on stage and she realizes that she's kind of not being herself. She has stretched herself to the limit. She's gone to places that she didn't think she would go to fit in. And I've been there. I don't know if you guys have been there, but I feel like as humans, we've all been there where we have that moment. And I've had that moment a couple times where like, what would my mom think of me right now? Right. Whether it was a dance thing, whether it was hanging out with friends and doing something I wasn't supposed to do. And she runs home to her mom, and her mom, instead of yelling at her, they kind of have this moment together where they both realize that they have been going through a really hard time. And this little girl's aunt basically calls her a slut, which
she calls her a whore.
It's horrible. Like, you're dressed like a whore, like you need to get changed. And her mom is getting all dressed up to go to her husband's wedding to his next wife. Okay, this is all this underlining story that's going on.
His second wife. They're not divorced.
Right. No, yeah. It's his second wife. Okay. And the mom basically says, that you don't have to go if you don't want to. They kind of have this moment of, we're both struggling right now, and I see you. Basically, it's like, I see you, and you're struggling as much as I'm struggling, and I am not going to make you do something that you don't want to do. And for me, that moment, because when I was going through my divorce, I had to have those talks with my daughter. She's in high school, and I don't want to put my pain and my hurt on her, but I also don't want to force her to do things that she doesn't feel comfortable with on the other side of this divorce. And when you have that moment with your kid, when you both realize you just did something that helped you get through a struggle, and it may not have been the best decision at a time, but you had to survive this moment. I'm putting on this hat and this smile and this fakeness because I've got to go survive this moment, but I'm not going to make you do it. That moment to me was the best part of the film.
Yeah. And then the movie ends with her standing there looking at her dance outfit and looking at the dress that she is supposed to wear to the wedding, and making the conscientious decision not to take either of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because neither of them fit her. Neither of them worked.
Right. And she ends up just wearing a blouse and jeans and going outside and jumping rope. And I thought that scene with the dress and the dance outfits leading into her going out and jumping rope, and the camera gets higher and higher, and she's just jumping and smiling like she's floating, like she's finally where she's supposed to be in this film. She's free.
She's being a kid, which is what the
yes,
movie's about.
yes.
She's a
And
kid
she's
being a kid.
no care in the world, and you shouldn't at 11. Yeah. And to me, that made up for there. Like Val said, there were flaws with the film. There were some editing choices. There were some pacing issues. But for a directorial debut, especially to end on that kind of note, I applaud the film for that. Absolutely.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned. I know we're not going to get too much into the technical stuff here, but I really didn't find the beginning very boring. But that's maybe because the only thing I really had to go on when I saw this movie was like a single screen cap in the Sundance catalog, so I didn't know what I was getting into. Honestly made the ending even more like of a punch in the gut, because I was just like, well, what the hell? And then this is the movie I'm watching. All right, well, this is apparently, because I don't remember I should probably like dig up my old Sundance catalog and find out what the summary on the original website was, because
it was on an app, isn't it now?
I don't know what if the Sundance 2020 app is still up. I should look, but yeah, because I didn't know hardly anything about the movie going in, and that actually just made all of the scenes
that much.
I think going in blind actually made me enjoy the movie more, because I had no idea what I was getting into. And I think
when I say boring, it's really like, because I read everything, I thought I was going to be watching child porn, basically. Like, I thought it was just going to be like this really salacious movie, and I was just expecting to be like feel uncomfortable the whole time. And I'm like, okay, I mean, this is a story about a girl and her mom and like dealing with life, and like it's like I was like, okay, well, let's sit here and watch this and see. Like I think that's why, because I had all of this like lead up to it, and then I sat down and I'm, oh, okay, well, been there.
Preconceived notions.
Yeah.
Done that part.
Yep.
Then it was so nice to see. I can't think of anything comparable really, where you get to see a movie about a girl that age, kind of just dealing with life, and having that part of our stories told. I can't think of anything else where I've seen that. And that for me was extremely moving, because again, the representation in film and the media, sometimes we just don't get to see ourselves or our past selves quite in that way. It's always something different. So that for me was very, very powerful.
All right, so yeah, I just found the summary on the official Sundance website. 11-year-old Amy lives with her mom, Miriam, and younger brother, awaiting her father to rejoin the family from Senegal. Amy is fascinated by disobedient neighbor Angelica's free-spirited dance clique, a group that stands in sharp contrast to stoic Miriam's deeply held traditional values. Undeterred by the girl's initial brutal dismissal and eager to escape her family's simmering dysfunction, Amy, through an ignited awareness of her burgeoning femininity, propels the group to an enthusiastically embrace an increasingly sensual dance routine, sparking the girls' hope to twerk their way to stardom at a local dance contest.
And I'm glad there was controversy over the film, because based on that, I don't know if I would have picked it. It just, that wouldn't really be my thing. And I like foreign films and I like exploring different cultures, but it wouldn't have grabbed me. And I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this movie. And it's hard to say. You can't really say you enjoyed it. It made me uncomfortable. It made me think, but I like that. I like being challenged. I like being pushed. I like having something to think about afterwards.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute.
Okay.
Film nerds, fellow
Larry.
film nerds. I've read, I'm sure like all of you have, on your own Twitter accounts, and people threatening to unmask you as a pedophile on Facebook and whatnot. I've read many of the arguments of people who are deeply offended by this film. And one of the things that's very common that I see a lot is that they believe the filmmaker, the director or whatever, could have told the story without being quite as salacious in the final scene. And sidebar, me personally, the final scene to me wasn't as shocking. There was a scene where they're practicing dance at a playground, Do you guys remember that? There were a couple of movies in there where I was like, "Whoa!" That more than on the stage. Sidebar part 2. I feel like really there's just a few camera angles that would have been different. That would have taken a lot of the heat out of the whole discussion. Now the marketing department's pretty glad that there's a worldwide controversy about Cuties because people are watching. Which is another matter, because if you really want something to go away, probably talking about it is not the best strategy. So, was there a question in there? I'm not sure what I'm asking. The thing.
No, I understand. I mean, in some way, I can understand that maybe some people might have wanted it. I don't know if dulled down, if maybe the edges filed back a bit. But
That's
I feel
what
like
I'm getting at. Exactly, Kaitlyn.
I feel like the edges are the thing that make, because it makes it hit harder, and I feel like that was the intention. I feel like you really have to shock the audience to really trigger the important conversation that we need to have about the sexualization of children on social media and on the internet and what our kids are learning. I don't feel like we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation right now, and I wouldn't be getting tagged by the fucking FBI if it wasn't triggering an essential conversation. Now, I do believe we are having this conversation poorly, but it is an important conversation, so I can understand. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a rather generic coming of age film, and I feel like if it hadn't been so shocking, if it hadn't really gone for the hard stuff, it wouldn't have become a thing, and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. And I do believe the conversation is important. I just believe we can have it without sending film critics death threats or trying to dox them with the FBI or ruining the actor's life.
The director's got death threats. She's not on social media anymore either.
She bailed on social media the day the poster dropped. She was out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I agree. Like I think like the film, I don't agree with everything in the film. The film should make you upset.
Right.
Like that's the point. Like if it doesn't make you upset, then that's a different conversation. But this film, I understand why people are upset. I understand why parents are upset. I understand why people who have been abused as children, and now are growing up and they're against this film. I get why they're upset, and they should be upset. The whole idea about this media and this medium about telling stories is that it should cause a conversation. And I've said it this whole time is let's have the conversation. Let's talk about why it makes us upset. And instead of sending death threats to the director who has brought this conversation forward for us, let's actually sit back and say, okay, how can we make it so that this isn't a normal thing that happens every day, so that we can look back at it and say, this doesn't happen that much anymore. So instead, I feel like we're doing a lot of yelling at people, a lot of pointing fingers, a lot of name calling, and we're not doing any resolution. Okay, so we get the movie taken off of Netflix. We get people to cancel Netflix. Netflix is not going anywhere. They're not shutting down. So you canceling your Netflix subscription is not doing anything to Netflix. But do you know what we can do is we can take this idea from this documentary and we can actually have discussions in our community, in our PTA, in our, smaller things with our kids and say, how can we teach our kids how to be social media savvy? How to be social media responsible, like we're like you said, Kaitlyn, we're having the wrong conversations. This film should upset you. Now what?
Well,
upsetting and difficult subject matter does not mean morally wrong. And that is what people are conflating these two. They're saying this movie is morally wrong because it made me uncomfortable, because it made me, think about things I don't want to think about. There is a difference between morally wrong and difficult to watch. And this is a difficult movie to watch. And that's what I've been trying to hammer home to people. I'm like, this is not an easy movie to watch. It's going to be hard. That doesn't make it wrong. That doesn't make it morally wrong. And that doesn't mean it shouldn't exist.
Right.
Right.
Well, bringing it back to what you were saying earlier, Val, Schindler's List is incredibly difficult to watch.
It's really hard.
Says,
opening weekend in Utah for Schindler's List, people got out with picket signs to not have them show the film because people were naked in the movie.
Yeah.
If people naked at Auschwitz gives you
'Cause that
arousal,
was the
you need to
problem.
have another conversation.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
Yeah. So again,
These things are really happening.
Right. And
Kids
Val,
are really experiencing life like this. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and-
let's
and-
not file those edges away because nobody filed the edges away from my life.
Yep.
Let's talk about this.
well, and I agree with you, Kirsten, and with Val is we don't have conversations. Like this has been a great discussion. I'm so glad that we had this tonight. But we as a society don't communicate anymore. And it's crazy because we have more access to more communication than any time in human history. But you're right, Val. We talk to each other. We yell at each other. We insult. We call names. We do whatever, but we don't sit down and discuss. And there's a couple songs by Frank Turner that I really like. And one is he says, you can use the words, I don't know, and I've changed my mind. And those are perfectly acceptable things to use and say, but we don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here's part of what I think this problem is too. The five of us, we don't agree with every detail about the film, but it turns out we kind of agree about the film. I don't think people who hate this film are going to listen to us.
No.
Right.
I feel like, look, we don't have to solve this at this podcast, and we can't. But the people who most need to engage in this conversation are not going to, right?
No.
Absolutely.
Which is parents who need to.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Fine. It's just
So
the problem.
The funny thing about that, Larry, is I tried to get two people on the podcast tonight that had an opposite view. And I said, hey, we're going to have this podcast. We're going to have a roundtable. We're going to discuss it. And I would love to get you on the show so that you can talk about, why this movie offends you so much and why, and let's have a conversation. One of the guys that said that he was going to cancel Netflix because of this said to me in a private message, well, I don't really hate the film, but I don't think it's good to promote this kind of film on Netflix. Basically, he posted it on Netflix, or he posted it on social media to cancel Netflix so he could be a part of the 15 minutes of canceling Netflix and people having the conversation. Okay. So I called him out. Okay.
Clout culture is so much fun.
The woman that I was going to have on tonight is very into pageants, and her daughters all have been in pageants. She's been in pageant world. I've known her for a long time. She's fantastic. She is going to cancel Netflix, or already has, because of this, but she hasn't seen it and she won't see it. And so therefore she didn't think that she should talk about it. And I said, well, you posted on social media with this big, long conversation about how maybe I shouldn't be friends with you anymore. Not me specifically, but if I agree with this film, I delete you right now but you haven't seen it and you won't discuss it. And I think it's a lot about the other side. They're angry about it and they want it gone, but they don't know how to have a conversation about it. And that's the problem. We haven't given people tools to be able to have conversations about things that make them feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And I feel bad about that because I'm just barely getting these tools in the last couple of years, because I've been told my whole life, if it's not pretty, don't talk about it. If you're going to cry, go in the other room. If you know what I mean? And so now I'm getting these tools about how to have conversations about how to feel uncomfortable. So we live in a society that when something makes us uncomfortable, we yell and scream, but we have no idea how to emote our emotions in the right way to have a conversation. So I'm kind of on their side because I feel bad, but I wish that they wouldn't be calling people pedophiles because the point is not that point. That is not the point. What you're doing now is hurtful and wrong. And that's a whole different conversation and podcast. But yeah, that's my.
I talked too much, and I'm sorry for the guests. I wanted to hear from you, and I've talked a little bit more than I intended. I do need to say, I want to maybe join you, Val, and stick up for some of the people who are very against the film. And I don't mean the ones that are turning you over to the FBI on Twitter. I don't mean those people. And I don't mean the people who told Tracy that he's a pedophile. I do not mean those people, right? Because I think it's important we realize that not everyone who does oppose this film or the screening of the film or wants to cancel Netflix, they're not all in the same camp. It's not fair to say that all of them are like that. They're not. There are people, and I know these people, and they did watch like the clip on Twitter, and it really bothered them. And it really made them feel like this is really wrong. We should not showcase 11-year-old girls in this way. And by doing it, we're causing harm. Now, I do agree with you, Val. They need to have the conversation. And that's really unfortunate that we can't. But I do want to say, I think their reactions are perfectly sincere, right? They're not coming from a place where they want to hate someone. And they're not coming from a place where they're like, well, I'm just, and cancel culture works both ways, right? Like it really does. They sincerely are offended by what they saw, and they're hurt. It hurts their heart and soul. And I do believe they should have a conversation, and I do believe that adults should be able to watch. But their intent isn't wrong. Their intent is to protect children. Their intent is to not corrupt someone or to not victimize someone so whatever else we may agree that like that's not the same view I have, but it is important to note that they're not all turning Kaitlyn over to the FBI and they're not all accusing Tracy of pedophilia. Unfortunately, too many are, and those people I have no patience for.
And those people are too loud.
Metaphorically, not really. I metaphorically want to punch them right in the throat. That's enraging. But now I don't have a conversation. But there's a lot of sincere people who are deeply offended and want to protect kids, and their intent isn't wrong.
Right. I agree with that in the sense that we need to be very careful that we're validating those feelings. As an almost psychologist, though, I'm going to say to those parents or those who have influence over children or supposed to be caring for children, at a certain point, you got to get over it. Because your feelings are valid, yes, but your responsibility is to protect these kids. And if you are not aware of their challenges and their lives and their hopes and their dreams and their frustrations and all of that, if you cannot offer them a safe harbor to talk about these things that can be life or death situations for them, then you have failed. So I don't care if, Bobby, who's 50 years old and super mad about the movie, I will say, Bobby, I validate what you're feeling. I get it. I understand that this is a trigger for you. And I mean that in a psychological sense, not like the trigger. Also, Bobby, let's work through that so that you can do what you need to do for your kid because your kid is far more vulnerable. So that's kind of where at a certain point, it's like, I'm like, yes, everyone, I want to hear all your feelings, but also, okay, grow up because you're the grown up.
Or coping mechanisms, damn it.
Well, yeah, and let's have a talk about that, Bobby. I can help you with some strategies with that.
Well, and that's the thing that frustrated me after I posted my review, and I didn't even get an in-depth review. It was just kind of my thoughts and feelings, and mostly about the controversy, is I kept trying to tell people, we're in the same boat. I don't want to see children exploited. I was a victim of a terrible set of events. The last thing I want is a child to experience that. I would not wish that on anybody. But sometimes art, like Larry had said earlier, is a mirror. It reflects back. And it's like the movie is saying the same thing. You might disagree on how it's saying it, but it's saying the same thing you are.
Yeah, we said that. I said that to somebody I was arguing with in your comment section. I was like, you and this movie are on the same side. Like all of the things you are yelling about, that you are angry about, this movie is angry about it. It's angry. Yep. It's not happy about it.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing too that I loved is at the end during that final dance routine, the girls are expecting, because the girls have built this dance routine with no parents around and with no other adult supervision, and they're doing what they think is going to get them the most likes and clicks online. Right. And when they do the dance, they're expecting a standing ovation. They're expecting to win first place. And instead, the parents are like covering their children's eyes and they're disgusted. And that girl freezes on stage because she hears her mom's voice singing a Muslim hymn and realizes that this isn't what I want to do, and literally runs off the stage in tears.
Yep. But that's not the part of the movie that the people are that's going around Twitter.
That's
that
not
context. It's just the beginning of that dance.
Because
routine.
that's not going to get clicks. And that's what's driving a lot of this is how can I make this salacious so I can get clicks to the website, I can get views, I can get
They're
notoriety.
proving the point of the movie. They're proving the point.
Exactly.
the irony of it. Like, the irony of it just not. Oh,
I will say
my
again,
little hurdle.
I don't necessarily think it's all about clicks. Kristen, I thank you for saying what you said. Adults need to be adults. I couldn't agree more. But I do think people are sincerely offended, right?
Mhm.
They're not fake offended, or not pretending to be offended, or they're not like, I can amplify my Twitter account if I send. They're like offended.
So, real quick, Larry, what I meant was is like those in the media, especially on the right, far extreme right media, are doing this to drive clicks. They're driving this outrage to benefit themselves. I'm not talking about the individual person, Joe Schmo, who's upset. I'm talking about people who are purposely doing this.
Yes, I'm on
Ted
board.
Ted Cruz going and saying that he's going to investigate Netflix, and I'm like,
Mike
do you know what a
Lee.
distributor is?
Mike
do you
Lee?
know what a
Our guy?
I don't think you know what a distributor is, Ted. Would you like me to explain the movie industry to you? Because I don't think you understand what it is, because Netflix had nothing to do with this movie.
I mean, they paid $4 million for it. That's what they
Is
had.
that how much they paid for it? That's a decent, hefting price for a Sundance movie.
Oh, yeah. For a foreign film, that's a decent spend, yeah.
All right. So for final thoughts, like what are our final thoughts? Where do we go from here? So we've got this film. We had a good discussion on it. Like Larry said, unfortunately, probably the people that need to hear this discussion will not listen because it's not what they want to hear. Because I know for me, through this whole pandemic and staying home and with everything that's going on in our world right now, and, you know, I say to myself almost every single day, what can I do about whatever thing is going on? Like, what can I do to help this thing? What can I do to make this thing not happen anymore? So about this specific thing, and maybe Kirsten, you can start us off. Like, where do we go from here? We've got this film, we've got this discussion, we've got this anger, but the best thing that we have about this film coming from both sides is we have an awareness about exploiting children that both sides does not want to see happen. So what do we do now?
So what we need to do now is we start with our area of influence. If that's the four walls of your home because of the pandemic and that's all you've got, that's okay. That's a lot. In fact, that's everything. You make that space safe and you have those conversations. Knowledge is power. We all know this. And the same is true of kids. You've definitely got to gauge what they're ready for and the way that, you know, what they can handle in terms of how you communicate. But, you know, to try and send them out into the world, whether it's the social media world or the physical world or whatever, without having these conversations, without talking about, you know, value as a human being. Like, your value is that you are a human being. And however you dress or, you know, style yourself or whatever, that's not why people like you. And it doesn't even matter really. I mean, it matters to teenagers, of course, if people like them, but you've got to find that spark within you and teach your kids that. Deal with negative emotions because they're there. And as you pointed out, Val, I'm the same way. Being a psychology major has probably helped me through all my weird issues more than anything else. I was also kind of taught to, you know, just push those negative feelings down because they're not appropriate. So you never really learn how to deal with them. Right. So as parents, caregivers, just general adults, let's start figuring out how to handle those negative emotions. And then we can teach that to our kids. And if you're feeling really stressed or upset by whether you're a kid or an adult, but what you're seeing online, it's always useful to just take a step back because your brain shuts down the communication centers of the brain when you're stressed. So if you feel that heat rising, get away from the keyboard. It's gonna be bad. So again, start with the area that you have focus over because that will ripple out into the world. But we've got to make these kids feel safe in our own spaces. So that's where I would start.
But someone's wrong on the internet. And
I don't care.
I have to correct them right now.
Stevie comment, honey, are you coming to bed? But someone's wrong on the internet.
Just keep a journal. Just do that. I'm going to write down all the times these people were wrong on the internet, and then you get it out of your system, but you don't have to actually engage. The journal of grievances.
Delete button so many times. Like I will get up there and I will delete.
I do not have that kind of self-control on Twitter, so I don't have followers.
Mine's more on Facebook because I'm like, will I get fired if I post this? Oh, delete.
It's a good motivator. But just everyone, be gentle with yourselves, be gentle with each other. I think in large part, most people are good. And we all, like you were saying, we all want the same things. We want people to be protected. So treat yourself nice, treat other people nicely. It's really pretty basic, honestly, when you get down to it. It's just hard
stuff, really.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any final thoughts about today and film and art and storytelling and conversations, and just a final thought before we get out?
Not sending death threats to people.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yes.
In every context, do not send death threats to people. Stop reporting people to the goddamn FBI. I can't believe that happened to me. God, like.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Report actual criminals to the FBI. Do not report somebody on Twitter. It's like calling the police because your pizza was not delivered on time. Yeah. Do not do that.
Just stop sending death threats to people, and stop yelling at the people who want to have difficult conversations. It doesn't make them wrong. Just stop. No death threats. It's fine. Tell your kids not to send death threats to people, and try to explain it to the adults in your lives that there's no conceivable way and no line of conversation where that is appropriate in any context ever, period. Done. No exceptions. That would be mine.
It's a life pro tip right there.
Yeah. So mine would be, don't be afraid to have conversations. Don't be afraid to look at something before you judge it, and listen to other people's opinions and thoughts. Listen to what the director had to say. Listen to, I had some people tell me, but this article here tells you you're wrong. And I'm like, you don't know that person, but you're willing to take their word over mine, and you know me. So, you know, we don't set out to think that you know what something is until you actually experience it. Don't go out with preconceived notions. I'm with Kirsten. Be more kind, be gentle. You know, and I've gotten into some heated discussions online, and I felt like Amy, because I'm like, that's not me. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to get angry online, and I don't want to be frustrated. But really quick, I had an author say to me, well, if the director went through something like this, she should have just made a documentary. She didn't have to do a narrative film. And I said, who are you to tell her how she should do her art? Would you want somebody telling you that you should write your book differently? No, because it's your story and you need to tell it the way you want.
I can't help but respond to that, Tracy. I just can't help myself. If you made a documentary about this, about those kids, it would actually victimize real kids who would then be all over the place, who would then have their identities known all over the world, and no one would watch it. But a documentary, to me, unless you found a way not to reveal who the kids are, would actually impact real people instead of imaginary ones. I think that
these are fictional people.
Val, I'll let you have the final word. And I have a tiny glimmer of hope. I'm a cynical bastard. Look, I think the world's in a terrible place. I think society's in a terrible place. I think it's almost hopeless. And I'm not giving up because I have a 9-year-old. Like, you know, we're in a bad spot.
And this is why we're a good team, because I'm not cynical at all. I am a glass half full, or this glass is totally full and I'll sell it to you and then we'll have a conversation about it. But I believe
you have a little thread of hope.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah, go ahead. You do? Okay.
In the 90s, I was alive in the 1990s. There was a guy, his name was Andrew Vax, and he's a child advocate, and he's an author. and I don't know if I said his last name right, but it's Vacchs or something. He wrote a book about Batman, a novel, and Batman went to Thailand and discovered child sex slavery in Thailand. And this guy toured around promoting his book. And he came to a local comic book store. And I was working at a newspaper at the time. So I went and I interviewed this guy. We talked about Batman. And we talked about child sex slavery. And we talked about these things. He showed me a brochure that was an advertising brochure for Thailand. And he said, hey, this is made for pedophiles. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, there's a little kid with a little lay around their neck, whatever, just being like a little kid. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, trust me, this is targeted to people who don't think like you and don't think like me. They see this and they're like, oh, they're promoting child sex slavery. So I did this interview. I did this thing. I took all this information, which was overwhelming and scary and frightening, and I took it back to my newspaper, and the editors more or less laughed me out of the room. They could not face the reality that anything this guy was saying, this lawyer from New York who's a child advocate, they could not face the fact that it could possibly be real. We had quotes from like people in Thailand saying, oh, actually, it's like the biggest export of Thailand is children, it's child sex slavery. At least now, at least the five of us, and at least some people, at least we're at a point where we can discuss the reality of some of these things. That I can say, yep, there's child sex slavery in foreign countries, and they sell kids to American men, and you can go over there and do unspeakable things. At least people can kind of believe that now. So I feel like we're dragging the ugliest parts of humanity into the light somewhat. And people still are reluctant, and they still don't like it, and they still want to shut it down, some people, and they still want to report you to the FBI and make death threats and do things. And label you with by the way, Tracy, I can't think of another worse thing for an adult male to be labeled with than be called a pedophile. It is horrifying, and it scares the crap out of me. It's really hard. This conversation now is really hard because somebody can just stick that label to an adult man, and it doesn't matter if it's 0% true. It hangs around your neck. Anyway, I feel like there's a little bit of hope. Lots of good and bad comes from social media and our open society, but at least the conversation is out there. And it wasn't 30 years ago.
Yeah.
At least not in Salt Lake City.
For me, I do innately feel that humans are good. I feel like there are a lot of crappy people out there, but I think most humans want to be good. I feel like we can also redeem ourselves, and I'm all open for people redeeming themselves. We've all done crappy things in our lives. We've all been shitty to other people. We've all made really bad decisions, and we're all going to keep doing all of those things. Okay. And I'm going to keep saying as a human, I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm not okay. Like all of these things. And I'm going to say them out loud because I think there's a huge part of the United States culture that we've been told for a long time to not say anything if it's not good, if it's not pretty. Right. And we sweep things under the rug and we just pretend earmuffs on that these things are not happening. So for me, I am so excited that this woman filmmaker actually had enough backing and enough money to go from seeing this dance recital at a festival to put it in a film to get made and then to get it accepted at Sundance. I am so excited she got paid $4 million to get this movie put on Netflix. I don't agree with everything in the film. I don't think the film is it's not my favorite film of the year, but it brings up a good discussion of topic. It opens the door for other filmmakers to talk about these things and to make films about these things so that we can have more discussions. So for me, I look at it that way because we need to have more discussions. We need more doors to open and we need to feel uncomfortable because the world is going to change whether we like it or not. And if you feel uncomfortable, you're going to change usually in a more positive way. Unless you don't want to change and you just keep being a dick. And then you're just going to keep being a dick. So there's those people. And then there's me. I want to be uncomfortable so I can be a better person. I want to stop being a dick at least 80% of the time. There's
80% less a dick. It's a good goal.
It's my religion.
My autobiography.
That's my life philosophy / religion. Just be a decent person and don't be a dick. Yeah.
And that's the whole reason that I really wanted to have this podcast, not just tonight's discussion. And I thank you all so much for coming on and talking for, almost 2 hours about this. But I wanted to start this podcast so we can talk about the things that people usually turn away from, hide from, because we have to talk about them. I am worse when I don't talk about them. My mental health issues go up. My suicidal tendencies and thoughts go up. When you tell me that I cannot talk about the things that bother me, I am not a better person. And I feel like I'm not alone. So this podcast is to talk about those things so that we can all have bigger discussions, so that we can all be better people, kumbaya, whatever. Thank you guys so much. If you're going to see the movie and you're going to get an opinion about it, we would love to hear about it. You can comment on this post. We're on Twitter. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. You can also email us at seeminglyappropriatepeople at Gmail. And we are going to be talking about some other fun topics coming up. We're going to talk about cannabis. We're going to talk about dating in my DMs. And I'm going to read what people have put in my DMs. And it's not pretty, guys. You shouldn't do these things. If you want to date, don't do these things. We're also going to talk about, on that same podcast, people that are women collector on Facebook. You're friendly people because you're collecting women, and we're going to talk about you. So all these important topics are coming up because people don't talk about them, and they get angry when I point them out, but they're real things. So thank you so much for tuning in. What?
I have to say one more thing, Val, or four things.
Ahead. Okay.
I don't use cannabis. I don't collect women. I don't. I hope. I'll do some introspection. No one DMs me anything at all. I'm definitely not dating. So I'll show up, but we're gonna.
The thing is every time I talk about these things, guys are like, "This is a thing that happens? Are you making this up?" No. There is a whole slew of people out there that are stupid and they have no idea what they're doing. But we actually have a woman collector who collects pretty women on Facebook as friends that will be on that show. So he's actually going to come on, talk to us and tell us his perspective. Because again, we don't want to put everybody in the same category, but if you have a certain topic that you want us to talk about, from music to movies to social justice to dating, whatever it is, let us know. Again, contact us on social media or email us. Thank you guys so much. Larry, Tracy, Kaitlyn, Kirsten, great conversation. And we'll see you next time, you guys. Bye-bye.